right, folks, welcome to this podcast. So to let you know, today's topics will be children's mental health, including young people's mental health in general, blended families, and if we've time, we'll be talking about relationships. I'm delighted to have Gill Turner here with me today. Hi, Gill.
Hi.
Good stuff. And Jill, we're just going to get straight into it.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, sure. Just kind of chatting about children's mental health. I think we mentioned earlier on, just before this call, that you'd watched the Roman Kemp documentary last night. This was the one, folks, that was on BBC Three, which was fighting for young people's mental health. What was your thoughts about that, Jill?
My thoughts initially were, what a hard time young people have from day go, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's all about measuring and targets and attaining and the education system. I think I've said this to you before. It's a bit like a sausage factory. It churns out sausages and they all look the same, don't they? And one size doesn't fit all. And these poor kids that are kind of having to conform to these expectations and doesn't bring the best out in them. And if they either get it right or they get it wrong.
Yeah. It's interesting, Jim. We have had conversations about this before, which is why I really wanted to do this as part of a podcast. And just kind of that, unfortunately, with schools, it tends to be quite generic. And they're trying to, like you say, one size doesn't fit all. And I certainly find that in my private practice that I come across a lot of adults now who, when they were back in school, maybe it was a time where dyspraxia or dyslexia people weren't aware of it, and the way teachers taught didn't suit the individual themselves. And as a result, they went on to think, oh, there's something wrong with me. Because as we know, when we're young, if there's something that's happening that we can't make sense of, we tend to blame ourselves.
Absolutely. And also I've got to mention social media.
Yes, yeah.
You even have to look a certain way and smile a certain way and pout a certain way.
Yeah, and isn't it just incredible? It always blows my mind when I come across people who judge young people and say, oh, they have it so easy, snowflake generation. I just kind of think, really? Really? Because if anything, I don't think it's a competition. I think every generation has its challenges. But certainly when you look at young people of today, as you said, social media, 24/7, that's their life. And like, that's the thing, you're like, in thinking about kind of how to help ourselves in an ideal world, people would have time limits with maybe their phones or their laptops or whatever device they're using. But that's not so easy for somebody who's grown up with that. It's almost like, being attached to a life support machine, actually.
Like having a spare limb, really, isn't it? Having a phone these days. And yeah, there's no sanctuary, is there? There's no switch off. And
what would you say to that, Jill? And again, we spoke about this just before the call, that folks, and Jill and I are the same belief that we don't believe anybody's the expert on this. That we're all just doing our best here. It just so happens that Jill and I work, in mental health, so we have a certain amount of experience. But that doesn't mean what we say is always right. Everybody's different. One size doesn't fit all. But thinking about kind of like, we'll say young people that do find it really hard to switch off, that let's say they need to have the device on all the time. Is there any way of managing that?
It's a bit addictive, isn't it?
Yeah.
Phones are designed, aren't they? They ping and they create attention all the time. They're designed for you to be on your phone using them. And it works very well. It works excellently. And people, have you seen young people sometimes who haven't had their phone for some reason, that they've lost their phone? They are absolutely bereft because they're out of touch with the world. So I think we've kind of created a bit of an addiction to being on the phone and knowing what everybody else is doing.
Yeah, absolutely, Jill. Do you know what I would recommend? Actually, it was recommended to me, is to watch on Netflix The Social Dilemma. because the social dilemma highlights how these companies create addiction within young people. And I think sometimes it's about informed choices. So it's not about telling people what to do, but just about kind of having that informed choice to really know kind of that how it is addictive, and actually kind of then putting the power back in your hands to decide, okay, do I need to take breaks away from my phone for a while? How can I manage it? How can I get some control back rather than my phone or my device controlling me? I just think that documentary, The Social Dilemma, it really highlights how the scrolling, how it kind of keeps you, distracted all the time. You see that with people, they lose hours and hours by looking at their phone. And, it's like we're living a second life.
Yeah, everybody's looking down, aren't they?
Yeah.
Nobody's looking up, making eye contact, having a conversation. Yeah.
It's difficult because that eye-to-eye contact, that connecting, that can be quite difficult. Now, in saying that, there's lots of positives to social media.
Yeah. I don't write it all off.
Yeah. Neither do I, Jill, to be fair. Neither do I. Okay, sticking with, actually, before I do that, anything else about the Roman Kemp documentary, Jill? I mean, we haven't spoken about this yet. I mean, I was shocked by the government's response and wanted to help initially 36% of the schools. Okay, we look at putting some help into 50% of schools. It's like, what? This is the crisis. This is the solution. Why isn't this helping 100%?
It's a sticky plaster.
Mm.
I think, without getting into politics, I think a lot of organisations and agencies that were in the community, that were a support, even things like the youth clubs, and they've gone. They don't exist anymore.
Yes.
There's just nothing there. So people are just falling through, aren't they? They're just falling through that hole. There's nothing to stop them. And if they're not picked up at home, and it's up to the school. And schools are doing quite a lot of social services work these days, aren't they?
Yeah, they certainly are. There's a lot of pressure on teachers and on everybody. But going back to youth clubs, that it just seems to be an obvious solution to this, and you saw the support groups that Roman Kemp, was helping to set up these, it's so crucial, these support groups. And I suppose that's kind of, as a community, stuff that we can do to make a difference. Instead of relying on the government, actually is to set up some support groups for people and
drop-in places for young people.
Yeah, that it's find ways sometimes, that we need to work in collaboration. It can't be just down to the government, just down to funding and all of that. Very much kind of working together. One of the listeners I know will be listening in, and she's a great support of mine for many years, but she wanted to kind of mention about the lack of confidence in young people. That was kind of one of the things that she was kind of struggling with. What's your thoughts about that, and what can they do about that, in your own opinion?
I think this goes back to the getting it right and getting it wrong. You hear lots of young people saying, "Well, I can't do that," and I always want to say, add on the word "yet." I can't do that yet. It's like they expect to know everything, and if they don't know it straight away, then don't know how to do it, can't do it. So I think again, it's this pressure, isn't it, for young people to get it right, and there's no way for people to go that get it wrong. So I think, how does that impact on your self-confidence if you're always frightened of getting it wrong? I think there has to be scope for not making that judgment of whether it's right or wrong. I'd like to get rid of all the crosses and ticks.
That's a whole nother show. If we did get into the politics of it, that is so true about that, is to let go of this need to be right all the time. And the thing is, that's how we learn. In a way, there's kind of no such thing as failure. Failure is learning. We have to kind of get something wrong to kind of learn it, get better and better at it. We're all work in progress, to be fair. And when you were saying, Jill, about, I haven't got it right yet, or, adding that, Another thing I certainly learned during the lockdown in having to change my mentality straight away, especially around technology, because I used to say, I can't with technology, I can't. And I remember a tutor of mine telling me to turn I can't around to how can I? And that mindset. And it's almost giving yourself a chance that sometimes we're kind of our own worst enemy. Sometimes we're just too hard on ourselves. It's okay to get it wrong and embrace just going, yes, I messed up and let it go.
But how much did I learn from that messing up? But I think children are frightened of messing it up. They're frightened of getting it wrong. And I think parents are great role models.
Yes.
How many times do you hear parents talking about protecting the children, and we didn't say this and we didn't do that because we didn't want to upset the children? Well, actually, it's okay for parents to let the children know that they don't always know the answer.
Yeah.
And that they get it wrong occasionally, and they're not always confident. So that will, make it more normal to not know.
Well, I suppose it's modeling the behaviours you want. So as parents, if you model behaviours actually that you don't know at all and that you're learning too, well, that allows the young person to feel the same way.
Exactly.
If you're
and
modeling,
not feel that they're a freak.
I think we all feel like freaks sometimes, to be fair, Jill. But that is so true. And it's interesting, actually, because that protecting, I remember we touched upon this in one of our earlier supervisions, and I brought this up in my mental health theatre show about this overprotecting young people. And actually, from what? Pain? Well, pain is a part of life. That's how we build our resilience. Stuff you were saying to me, Jill, and I think it's so true.
We have to equip children to deal with the real world, and the real world isn't perfect. And the sooner they learn that, the better, really, that things go wrong and you have a horrible time for a while and then it stops.
Yeah, absolutely. So going back to that confidence thing, so allow yourself to get it wrong and be okay with that. Be okay with messing up. Somebody else, a parent of mine, who had mentioned about her 13-year-old daughter and the issue she was having with her daughter. And she was saying that she was having an issue with her attitude, that she thinks that she's always right, that she doesn't listen, she gets detention all the time, she doesn't like rules, she's pushing all the time. What's your thoughts about that, Jill?
A typical teenager, it's that rebellious stage, isn't it?
Yeah.
Where we think we know everything and all the adults know nothing. Everybody's stupid except our peers. And then we learn later on in life that actually perhaps our parents did know something and I didn't know all the answers, and actually they might be quite clever after all. It is that thing, I think, of pulling away. I always say the purpose of being a teenager is that they're so horrible and so badly behaved that you break that tie. You break that tie so that they are then independent and young adults. So I think it's something about the normal stage of adolescence where they become objectionable and difficult and what have you. They're evolving.
So what you said, Jill, as that parent was finding this all difficult, are you saying that she needs to accept this more and kind of pull back and acknowledge that this young person is evolving, that they're finding their own opinions, that the more they push, I suppose, the more that they're going to push themselves. Do you know what I mean?
I mean, we've talked before about parent, adult, child.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes the more parents get into that parent mode and the more they start telling a 13-year-old what they should and shouldn't do, the more of a reaction you're going to get from that teenager of being an impossible child.
Yeah.
I think it's something about stepping into the adult with that 13-year-old, treating them like an adult, treating them with respect, in the hope that they then step up into being that adult with you. It's about changing that dynamic from parent-child to something that's much more comfortable as adult.
Do you know what, Sheila, as you do that, like as you got your hands together, showing a kind of a level playing field, it reminds me in my own family therapy training of highlighting doing to or doing with.
Exactly.
And as people, none of us like being told what to do. Whether you're a child or an adult, nobody likes being told what to do. So you kind of have to put yourself in their shoes. If that's not working, that's not working. So it's kind of like sometimes you got to, instead of doing to, that doing with. And I find, especially with young people, that the more you involve them, the more you give them a bit of responsibility, the more you allow them a bit of control over the situation and choice, the more they're going to work with you as a parent. It doesn't have to be such a fight and a struggle, that there needs to be a different approach where you're working in together rather than fighting each other. Nobody wants that.
And what tends to happen is the parent gets more authoritarian because they're trying to get control over a situation, and the teenager becomes more rebellious, and it's just changing that dynamic.
Absolutely.
And listening. I was talking earlier to someone about young people don't have voices, do they? They, we dismiss what, just young. What do you know?
And I've been dismissed. It's interesting actually, because another parent spoke to me, knowing that I was going to be having a chat with you today, Jill, and the other parent was complaining about her child, saying she doesn't listen, she's constantly having screen time, but she was saying even sometimes to the point where she's like covering her ears because she doesn't want to just hear. And it's a difficult one, isn't it, Jill? Because I think it's very easy to think they're being a naughty child, or it's like what you were saying. Actually, what if they don't feel listened to? What if that's the very thing, that they don't listen because maybe the other person's not listening to them, and then they're both just modeling the same behavior of not listening.
Perhaps parents get stuck in the mode of telling, instructing. And children stop listening to that, don't they? Because as you said, when you're 13, you think you know everything.
And essentially, actually, because one of the parents said to me, and I've told her 6 times. To be fair, when she said that to me, I almost feel the young person's frustration. I'm thinking, I cover my ears too by somebody nagging me 6 times. Probably not what a parent wants to hear, and no doubt they'll let me know when they listen to this podcast, I can tell you. But no, in all seriousness, let's go back. Let's go and explore the parenting styles, because I think that might be helpful, and it leads us nicely into blended families as well. Yeah. So this was something that Jill shared with me many years ago, and wow, I found it very insightful, and I shared this with other clients, just people in general, because that's what we are, with people in general. But there's 3 types of parenting styles, and then the result of each one. So Jill, if you're happy to share those, please.
Yeah, sure. Well, it is like a hierarchy of parenting styles as well, isn't it? And the top one is the authoritarian. You will, you must, you shall. Yeah. It's the pointing finger, instructing somebody what to do. Might work, well, children are very small. It doesn't work so well when they start having a mind of their own. We give them the gift of having a mind of their own, and then we wonder why they question us.
Nicely put, Jill. I reckon Ben, who'll be doing the video on this, will be highlighting what you've just said. It's almost getting annoyed. You can imagine parents getting annoyed, but thinking maybe there's an element of truth in that, actually. And then as a result of that parenting style being telling them what to do, what tends to be the outcome for the kids?
Rebellious children.
Okay.
Rebellious children. Yeah. I mean, we as adults, if somebody starts telling us what to do, we will go into rebellious child. We'll start being resistant and no, I'm not going to do that, and throwing our toys out the pram.
Yeah, and
also, it doesn't work. It's a bit too, it might work in the army.
It probably needs to be there. They need to conform. But there's also that, remember you saying before that you have the rebellious child or the child who conforms. Yeah. What happens is that they tend to lack confidence later on in life, because they've only just done what you've asked them to do. They haven't allowed to think for themselves and have their own mind and make choices.
Work it out for themselves. Because, as parents' job really is to equip our children to deal with life, isn't it? And to give them the skills to cope with everything that comes along. So,
Yeah, absolutely. So then, okay, so you've got your authoritative side.
Yeah,
What's
that's up
the
the
other?
top there. And
Yeah,
then in the
okay,
middle, you've got democratic, which
okay,
fits with parent, adult, child, because it's the adult, isn't it? It's being democratic.
okay,
So, you know, and then the bottom one is the laissez-faire, which is easygoing, don't mind, don't care, do what you like, which is the complete opposite of the authoritarian. And the
yeah,
only thing that works is that one in the middle, that being democratic.
say
You
more
don't
about
say
that.
to a child, what would you like to do today?
Yeah,
Because they might come up with the most ridiculous response to that. What you do is you give them some choice, but within a certain boundary of, well, we could do this, this, or this. What do you think? So that they feel empowered
yes,
and they're getting confidence
yes.
to make a choice. Okay, well, we could do, or we could dissent. So, what about the weather? And we can have a conversation about it. And in my experience, that works so much better with children
Mm.
and children's development, because let's face it, they've got to go out into the world and negotiate, haven't they?
Yes, absolutely. So like that, it's not a case of what you want for dinner and they start reading off 10 different choices. But what you can do is say, would you like this or would you like that? You
Yeah,
know, that it's not a case of you're going to have egg and chips whether you like it or not. It's a case of maybe the parent thinks about, okay, well, there's two meals I'm happy to cook. Which one would you like? It involves them. So
yeah,
it doesn't have to be, as you say, the delay saying kind of, well, we don't really care because they do need boundaries and a certain amount of containment, if you like, but they definitely need a choice. And I think that's the thing. I think for young people, a lot of things feel out of their control.
exactly.
So it allows them to feel a bit more in control. So it's offering them choice within a certain amount of containment.
And, you know, young teenagers can come up with some wild ideas. And
Mhm.
as a parent, it could be, oh my God, that's a car crash. But it's about, you don't say that. You say,
Yes,
okay, tell me more about that. How would that work? Oh, okay. Well, what about this? Or what about you start the conversation rather, because I think sometimes because we know something is obviously a car crash, because we've been
yes.
there, we've done it, we know it doesn't work. But that young person has got to work at that thinking for themselves.
For themselves. So, and I suppose that makes me think of to make sure not to criticize your children because that's only going to remove the
Not shoot
confidence.
them down.
Sure, even if it's the most ridiculous ideas. Okay, so tell us more about that. How
Yeah, how's that going to work?
you know, as opposed to just shooting down straight away. So there is, I mean, look, I mean, obviously, I do believe it's one of the most difficult things in the world is to be a parent. And it goes back to kind of allowing yourself to mess up, that we're
Oh,
learning as
yeah.
we go along and just kind of trying different things.
And saying to you, do you know what? I got that wrong. I shouldn't have done that. Or that was a really bad idea. Or I realise now that wasn't the best decision. And that's again modelling to them to then come
Yeah.
to you and say, I got it wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. Modeling the behaviors you want. So if you want your child to be able to say, okay, fair enough, I got that wrong, you've got to be able to model that behavior as an adult. It's
Yeah.
that whole thing of do as I say, don't do as I do.
I always say children take absolutely no notice what you say.
Okay.
They take notice of what you do.
Okay. Okay. Hearing that, Jill, hearing that. Jill, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate your time.
It's all right, we enjoyed it.
Good stuff. Okay, Jill, thanks again. And again, listeners, we hope you found this helpful. Let us know your comments as we're learning as we go along too. So, and if there's anything that we're not aware of, let us know. Okay, thanks, Jill. See ya.
Thank you for watching Counsellor Convos with Sheila McMahon. If you've enjoyed this video, consider subscribing to the channel.